Good afternoon. Welcome to the Devon and Cornwall Iaq branch technical evening. I'll hand over to Ross Hayward from Chepstow Plant shortly, but just a couple of housekeeping points to mention first. Firstly, in terms of questions, please feel free to post any questions in the chat function, and then we can run through those at the end of the presentation, as well as any that anyone wants to pose in person. Secondly, just a reminder about the Iaq app. So just a reminder to sort of download that if you haven't already, and your CPD record will be automatically uploaded to that. And thirdly, just a reminder to everybody about the Iaq Benevolent Fund. For anybody that may need some help or assistance or guidance, the welfare officer Wanda is also happy to help. The fund can be used in many ways, and in these strange times it may be of use to some of you, or indeed other IUQ members that you may know. So please spread the word. So housekeeping over, I'll hand over to Ross to take us through some of the safety and technological advances associated with Mobile Plant and Chepstow over the last few years. So Ross, over to you.
Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for all attending and taking the time out of your day to attend this afternoon session. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ross Hayward. I am Head of Assets and Commercial at Chepstow Plant International, and I've been in the industry now just shy of 10 years. Predominantly, my job focuses on asset lifecycle management, risk management, and the use of technology within the industry, which are just some of the themes running through today's presentation. As mentioned already from Brian, I ended on the chat function, give any queries until the end, and then hopefully we can address and go through any of the ideas or queries that have come up in the presentation. There are a few topics within the presentation, so I'll try and move through them quickly. I'm sure everyone's mindful in Tuesday afternoon and getting closer to the end of our working days. So presentation today aims to cover three core areas: safety progress within Chepstow Plant, how we as a business have contributed to the industry from an asset perspective, technological progress and the impact within quarrying, how this can be used to boost performance, along with a look ahead to future developments within our industry. And finally, a few slides on learning development with a particular focus on the environment, decarbonisation, and how learning and development can propel business further to reach industry and UK emission levels in the future. So as I mentioned, the safety section will cover how safety has progressed in the industry with a strong focus on inclinometers and ADT stability, and just a little bit of theory to discuss how we can measure safety culture and how we as an industry can try and improve and move forwards. So I'm sure everyone attending today is more than aware of inclinometers and their critical role in ADT stability. But for those who may not be as aware, I just wanted to run through some key dates in getting to where we are now. So our journey started a little over a decade ago with a worrying rising trend for Chepstow Plant and the industry for ADT turnovers. By 2014, turnovers were increasing sort of circa 30% year on year, really telling us that something had to be done about it. And the first step for this was prevention, i.e. combat the rising overturn trends, which included retrofitting inclinometers, and then including inclinometers as a pre-tender requisite. So the joint collaboration between Sibelco, Chepstow Plant and other major nationals in these purpose-created open forums really made this possible. From 2016 onwards, we at Chepstow Plant then took this one step further by shifting from a preventative mindset to standardization. So what does that mean? Well, simply every new ADT which was ordered by us from this point onwards would have inclinometers fitted in the factory as standard. We then start to have control measures in place and predefined manufacturer parameters to enhance ADT safety. From 2017 now to date, we've sort of seen a shift into the interdependency bracket with respect to ADT stability, which in our opinion is that direct result of in-house learning and development, using accredited training programs and the fail tip data available to us from the OEMs. results of which can be seen in the next slide and on the graph. Since our standardized approach in 2016 in the training, we've had in our business, we've seen an eradication of ADTs overturning while skips have been raised. 2017 also formally saw the introduction of failed tip data from the onboard telemetry from the OEMs, which for those unfamiliar, as it suggests, it records data every single time there's been a failed tip. During that time, within Chepstow Plant, we've then investigated and closed out each one of these incidents to keep pushing for progress. So in short, 2017 recorded no ADT turnovers while skips were raised, and touch wood, as of this afternoon, we haven't seen any recorded since. Now, the graph data is exactly what we would expect to see with the work that we put into it. We've seen a complete reduction in the ADT turnovers when the skips are being raised. We've seen a substantial rise in this failed tip data from all of our ADTs in 2017 and 2018, followed by that nice decline in 2019 and 2020. Now, the inclinometers, from our perspective, they push operators towards this interdependent safety behaviour, and they challenge site or the tipping conditions. So therefore, as perceptions are challenged and changed, tip areas or working methods evolve, the less failed tips occur. Now, probably some of you may already have spotted in 2020, it's quite a big decline in it. Inevitably, that's down to the dreaded COVID and less hours worked. But even when we compare the amount of dump truck SMRs in 2019 to 2020, trying to take into account COVID, we're still seeing a real positive decline in trend on it. To sort of go alongside that, and so we're not sort of putting too much onus on operators or technology, the in-cab audible alarms, they're still prompting our employees to stop and consider the unsafe act when a failed tip arises. So we're still generating positive change to carry on progress both we and the industry have all made in the last 10 years. And sort of to go on from that, just looking at a bit of safety culture theory, I'm sure most of us on the call today already aware of the Bradley curve and progression in safety cultures from a reactive one to an independent one. I don't want to necessarily today's presentation to be too heavy in the theory, particularly at 4:10 on a Tuesday, but I thought it was a good opportunity to share some thoughts on it. Ties in quite nicely with that ADT inclinometer campaign. So for those not necessarily familiar with the curve and the different safety cultures, in short, the main difference between your reactive and dependent versus an independent and an interdependent culture is the employee's engagement and your commitment to safety without that constant management supervision. And these culture differences are perhaps best reflected by comparing what the concept of zero incidents means for each culture. So in your reactive culture, you start off with the notion that zero incidents is an impossible, or it's a faraway vision that you're not quite sure how you get there, or you're not quite sure if you could get there. And then as you can progress through the cultures and you come down that curve, this aspiration soon starts to become closer and closer to reality. Within the dependent cultures, almost as it says there, they're expecting your zero incidents. And I think the comparison for what can be quite heavy theory, just comparing that basic zero incident comparisons between it can help explain the progression along the curve without going into a much more deeper sort of nitty-gritty detail. But I think everyone probably here on the call would all agree that there's no doubt that we all strive to be in that interdependent section from a safety point of view. So for us then, when we look at that theory and everything else, the curve really presents two big questions for us all to continually ask ourselves. How did we get here, and how do we progress things further? But Probably an important thing for us all to always ask ourselves is to progress and move forward on things. We've got to know where we are now, or rather, what's our starting point. And we have a lot of conversations back here internally as to where we are, how we do, and etc. And in our thoughts at the moment, with advancements in inclinometers, other health and safety initiatives over the last couple of years, with our culture, and really how we also define our approach to zero incidents, we would say that we probably hover towards an independent to that interdependent section, but probably certainly more on that independent side. So going back to that first question, how do we think you get there, or how do you get to where you want to be? And in our opinion, leadership really is one of the greatest tools to advance from one section to another. It can all drive us to continually improving our knowledge, improving the values and standards that we set ourselves and what we follow. Secondly, to us, it's investment, but it's investment in competency in our operators and in training and development. If we can't develop our operators to improve, then it becomes very, very difficult to shift along. As is equally important, embedding in this safety culture through conversations and continue to engage our workforce on this daily basis. And in our opinion, without a drive to daily challenge our actions and approach to work, as I said, that progression from one culture to another is challenging. And so how do we progress from one culture to another? And again, in our opinion, there needs to be evidence of safety through integrity rather than just price. And so this means really having to have these discussions right at the start of the process in any form of tender stage for any of us set foot in a live working environment. And so it enables us then to keep on building on employee development, feedback continually on safety observations, whilst also championing these leadership values across all management levels and with all employees. And just on a slightly lighter note, I'm sure we've all seen this classic sales meme of the tyre swing, where the gap analysis between departments and client and customer can often be substantial. You've got a salesman there who sold you possibly the comfiest tyre swing you can imagine. You've got accounts in the back office trying to build an entire roller coaster, and in the end, the customer just wanted a bulk standard tyre swing. And in my opinion, progression, health and safety can be very similar. It's all about closing this gap through leadership and workforce interaction, and sort of pushing client and contractor alignment across all these areas of health and safety. And in a lot of ways, if we're not aligned in our understanding and we all collectively understand our areas for improvement, then it starts to ask the question, well, then how can we progress within health and safety and move consistently towards that goal of zero risk within all of our live sites? So hopefully that gives us a bit of an insight from a Chepstow Plant point of view in how we approach safety, our safety culture, and what we try and do here on a continual basis to challenge and develop it. So moving on to the technology side of the presentation, mostly focusing on data analysis, introduction of new technologies into the industry, such as Hall Assist, and then looking to a few other ideas as to where the industry may go in the future, we may all experience. So first up, data analysis and its role in quarrying. The 5 steps coming up on the screen now illustrate very, very simply our approach for each and every one of our clients when it comes to recording, analysing and implementing any form of change. And from a general business perspective, I doubt this changes from any company on the call or anyone who's in the wider business, particularly from the feedback and the loop learning, where we'll try and take the information, learn from it and input some positive change. But in our opinion and experience, we all have different on-site challenges or views on which KPIs are the most important to us. For some, it might be tracking fuel burn or litres per tonnes carried. Others might be more focused on production tons per hour. And no two quarries are really the same. So we've got to start asking the questions, why should all our reports or targets or analyses be the same across everything? And certainly over lockdown, where we've had more of these Zoom or Teams meetings, perhaps spending more time with our PCs rather out and about, we found one of our key challenges back here is avoiding getting to the point of data saturation. I'm sure, as I said, we've all kind of thought that at some point. But if we haven't, I mean, what is data saturation? It's when we receive information from across the business and it's too much of it. It's unstructured, not necessarily analysis, and it's just raw, it's conflicting or just visually unclear. And we end up then not being able to make the right decisions in a swift time frame, which in reality we make all these tweaks and changes in our everyday. And really this information shouldn't be empowering us. It should be allowing us to make those fast decisions to try and correct things or improve things. It comes back round to ultimately, if we can't digest what's being presented to us, how can we implement site efficiencies or any improvements? And so how we look at things back here, we start to sort of say, well, no different to health and safety. We know where we want to get to, where we want to see improvements on site, but how can we achieve it with our assets? And our most important way to do that will be using the onboard telemetry. And the services from the OEMs have helped propel our understanding of site performance to a new level, and they provide better data analysis to help us improve. And here at CPI is for our own objectives, it's all about finding data anomalies or performance improvement possibilities and search for small 1 or 2% improvements. This could be as simple as saving 1 to 2 seconds on each bucket load, or getting operators to push that one extra load before break time. And really, in other words, we're looking at the principle of aggregation of marginal gains, which simply is the principle of searching for 1% improvements across every area. And these 1% can seem insignificant by themselves, but you add them all together and there's a fairly substantial improvement to be made to everything we do. And for any keen cyclist, this is the principle which helped propel Team GB and Sky, pioneered by Sir David Brailsford, and it resulted in the pinnacle of their success with the Olympics and all the Tour de France. So really the next couple of slides help focus on how we've used Volvo's newish system, which produces the data which we try and translate and use back here with Hall Assist. And the important thing for us is that the systems which we're looking to put in place, they work alongside current reporting mechanisms, and so we can get the most out of our data. So it's not just going into the ether, it's not just falling on deaf ears. So for those who aren't overly familiar with Hall Assist, perhaps wondering what I'm going on about, I've got just a short video here from Volvo just to provide a brief overview for those unaware. So, put simply, the system it's a revolutionary onboard weighing system, which produces a granular level of detail for every dump truck cycle that they complete. And using this platform, we're able to monitor back here operator performance for us anyway, in a new unseen level. For example, using the system, we can study tip-in, loaded and unloaded travel time on every haulier to better understand productivity times across the quarries. We can look at fuel burn for each cycle, and you could cross-reference it then against the driver, or we can look at the haul distance or whether it's uphill or downhill. And we can understand all of this whilst directly comparing it on site against different haul routes or material types. And by doing all of that, and comes to a point again with data saturation, but you can look at it all and start to realize which driver might be burning more fuel than anyone else for the exact same haul, or is there a reason why it's a slightly longer haul time or less productive. And so these benefits and the rest that come up on the screen now are really what we at Chepstow have been seeing and have been working with customers to help deliver. And so, for instance, the 9% fuel burn, which we got up there for saving and cost reduction. The Haul Assist system provides a live traffic management for all the ADTs on site. And we have operators therefore who can try and understand cycle times that little bit more, whether there are ADTs queuing to be loaded by a shovel or an excavator. If so, why rush back, burn more fuel, and then burn more fuel again whilst idling and waiting? And really, we've seen it allows operators to drive more safely, particularly on any sites with narrow haul roads, as you've seen in the video, and just in general, average out cycle times. And again, coming back to something that's tangible for us to all hold on to, looking for these productivity improvements. And whilst the system in its current format is great, as with anything, we're always looking at how can we develop it, how can we change it, and how can we deliver more back to our customers, to our site, to everything as it is. And so this slide really just touches on the development of the system and what we're hoping to evolve further with SMT. We're fortunate enough to have worked with Volvo since day one on this, right from initial concept through to beta testing and it going live right at the back end of 2019. It's where we've invested heavily in it from a knowledge, capital, infrastructure. We are now running the largest haul assist fleet within Europe, and so there's some exciting stuff for us to look at. And at the moment, we're looking at trials for live data analytics from a sort of production point of view on site. So you get to take that one step further, and you can look at sort of the aggregation of production. We know where you are at any given point in the day. You can set targets. You can try and work out a lot closer to where you are or where you've got to be. And really, it helps underpin some of these data challenges we've been discussing, where you don't necessarily need to pour through reams and reams of spreadsheets or endless meetings to try and understand where you are. Instead, you can try and get a glimpse as to what's going on, and then if necessary, redirect or redeploy or whatever you need to do to try and make the improvements. And so with where we've got Haul Assist here, it always gets us thinking back here, where are we going in the future? And really the sort of final technology slide is one for some debates, either a little bit later or offline or just for yourselves. But it kind of underlines where we at Chepstow Plant feel the industry is heading, where we think things are going to change. And the important area for us at the moment is any technology or initiatives that really focus on decarbonisation, such as electric vehicles, or any form of development where we're able to remove risk from the live environment. So that might include something like the remote piloting or the use of virtual or augmented reality in a maintenance function, or of course the autonomous vehicles. some of these are already in play, and albeit they seem possibly far away, but in quarrying's bigger brother, in mining, the autonomous trucks are already in play, have been for the last decade or so, as has the remote piloting. And all these newer technologies, they always cause a bit of a debate over here, particularly between generations back here, where we've got sort of, well, people right from the 20s up into the 60s. But one thing that any of our debates back here always bring back home to us is that none of these future developments, however we look at them, whatever they may be, we can't realize them without having competency. And if we don't have the right people for the right application, then we won't achieve it either. And so you look at something like a vision of a fully electric and autonomous ADT fleet. If we don't have the right people in the right application, then it becomes a vision, not an actual tangible target. But just some thoughts from us as to where we think it might be heading. And as I said, they always prove a popular debate topic, or where other people think it may be heading instead. Just to go into sort of the final section in our learning and development, it sort of touches on how the seemingly small changes can aggregate into much larger impacts that we've been previously referring to, and a little bit there again on decarbonisation and what that can actually mean in reality. So the first one on training impact, and I'm sure all of us here today recognise the importance and the value in training our staff, whether it's operators, managers, supervisors, whatever it may be. So I don't necessarily want to dwell too much on this one. It's still important nonetheless, just to refresh. But for us at Chepstow, the main driver has, and it always will be, training as a tool to drive safety standards on site. There may be other factors such as pushing efficiencies or environmental impact and having a look at it, as these are the sorts of things that can get us that tangible return where we all look at when it comes to investment and resource time, etc. But for us, it's safety is always at the forefront of training when we're always having a look at it. But there are areas, of course, where we see success, and in particular, it's nice to have this conversation with the Southwest region, as we have some of the highest staff retention rates in the country within the region, a lot of which we attribute to the training and the competency and everything there, which to us at least anyway, and hopefully to our valued customers in the area, it is crucial to the ongoing success within the region. And so it sort of brings us into the last couple of slides where it seeks to try and fuse together everything else I've tried to sort of speak on and put together, and looking at what we determine as the zero carbon operator. And these KPIs in particular, they focus on these aggregated marginal gains, the development and use of technology to help evolve our operators. And so, as I've mentioned, the key driver for us really when we look at stuff like this now is decarbonisation, and it's something that's ever more important for everyone, particularly considering the end of the red diesel rebate in the next 12 months, which I'm sure, like us, you're not particularly looking forward to, and the ongoing drive to meet industry and UK-led emission targets. So any gains that can be made in gravitating towards decarbonisation and reduce fuel usage can all direct the bottom line. And so our Freud initiative strives to do this and create this zero carbon operator, which to us, what is the zero carbon operator? Well, to us, it's someone who understands the impact our industry has on the environment, someone who understands fuel burn rates, the direct costs we have on fuel, but also sort of understands it that one step further. They understand the productivity, where we have, if we're underfilling dump trucks, then we've got more loads and we're wasting time, fuel and everything else. Or keeping an eye on asset management, whether that's excessive engine power or not having that correct ratio between the brake versus retarder usage, as an example. And so to come into sort of the final point here really is slides like that where we talk about initiatives and everything else. I might sort of undercut myself. They always look great in brochures, and they look great to plaster them about everywhere, saying we do this initiative, we do that, etc., etc. But we've always got to ask ourselves, in my opinion, two real important questions when we're going down this sort of route. Does it work in reality, and does it actually produce any results? And for us, the short answer is yes. We have directly applied this initiative to a few customers, but one in particular, which has helped identify a lot of the examples currently on the screen at the moment. So as an example, we established that the EC750 EL on a certain site was using 106% more fuel an hour in high power mode. So in exact litre terms, it's 33 litres an hour versus 68 litres an hour, which by the time you build that over an entire year, that's nearly 70,000 litres of fuel wasted every year. Look at idling. This is already on a lot of people's radars and a lot of our own customers, but just 30 minutes idling a day per truck, which probably, if we're all honest, isn't that difficult to do, whether it's a break time, the start of the day, the end of the day, whether you just want a toasty cab when you get in there in the morning. That's 3,500 litres a year wasted per truck. And so all of these figures on the screen now and everything else, they're all based on tier 5 engines, but you start to add this up over across teams or multiple sites or across your entire fleet. And this wasted fuel, whether we're looking at it from a cost or an environmental point of view, massively starts to rack up. So if our fleet, as an example at Chepstow Plant, our ADT fleet, had an average idle time of only 30 minutes a day, then we as a business would waste nearly 500,000 litres of fuel every single year just on this. And if we think one step further, again on decarbonisation and what this excess fuel represents other than direct cost, profit on the bottom line, it's that EC750 scenario could produce over or nearly 200 tonnes of carbon every single year just by having it on the wrong engine mode. The idling scenario for 10 ADTs, that's nearly 100 tonnes of carbon every single year being wasted. So it doesn't take a lot to have a couple of prime movers on site, a little bit worse on your idling time, and looking back at the information and everything else, then you're burning in the hundreds of thousands of litres a year too much and massively contributing in overall pollutants, not just on the carbon side, by the time you consider carbon monoxide or the NOx, etc. And so for us, as questions and costs start to mount from this environmental perspective, analysing our assets in this way and combining it with development of our operators really can have this substantial impact. So for me then, just a final question for me to ask, does it produce any results? Well, for the customer we're on about here, and through the methodology where we've looked at the data analysis, we've looked at the training, we've looked at this zero carbon operator, these foil initiatives, etc. We've helped identify over 300,000 litres of fuel savings per annum. And all of that has been built up just from these 1 to 2% savings. And that's really where, towards the start, when we say, they really do build together. You only got to consider if you're in a quarry for a period of 3 to 5 years, it's an awful lot of wastage, which perhaps we can realise and try and move towards. But that's everything from me. Thank you all very much for listening. I hope you all found it insightful to how we at Chepstow approach the sector, and really the opportunities that we see that lie ahead for us, whether that's in health and safety or development or within our assets and sort of the decarbonisation that we've sort of spoke about. So on that note, I'm obviously more than happy if there are any questions or any other sort of ideas to talk on, more than happy to try and help or talk through them a little bit more.
I've got a couple I could kick off with, Ross. One is, you mentioned on one of the slides the Rock to Road phone app with Volvo. What's that about?
So the mobile phone app, so we were trying it back in the summer, and it's still some things I think they're working on, but what it allows you to do is have like a non-Volvo branded asset, or like a fitter on site or a site vehicle, and that will then show up in the ADT Hall Assist. So if you've got 840s running around a site, they will be aware of incoming vehicles into a live risk environment.
Okay, so you got to have the basics of the Hall Assist set up.
It runs off the platform, and it just sort of gives that greater visibility to everyone. But it's still in development. It's still stuff we're working with them on. But yeah, it runs off that base platform.
Okay, okay. And where do you see the changes and advances in fuel technology going, bearing in mind the red diesel rebate coming to an end next year?
Good question. Ideally, we'd all like to be moving towards the electric side, which I think we're still a fair few years off. I think personally, the greater challenge, or the opportunity rather, will be to move to more biodiesel dependent. So albeit we might still be burning the fuel, the pollutants and everything else that we're emitting is less. And it might bridge that gap in between what's going to cost now and what's going to cost in 12 months' time. But I know there are exciting developments with Volvo and some of the other manufacturers on the electric, also jumping across the autonomous side. But I still think until we can get to that point in the next year or two, we should still have that strong focus on developing our operators and looking at it on that side.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is the Volvo stuff, it seems to go quite hand in hand in terms of electric and autonomous with Volvo. Is that the case, or are they generally looking at sort of electrically operated?
Yeah, so I believe it's out in the open now anyway, their TA15 is their autonomous hauler. It's autonomous and electric, so it's only a 15-ton capacity. But the idea with it being autonomous and everything else, you run a fair few more of them on site. I don't know why they developed at the same time, probably because the challenges they've had to overcome from an electric point of view has helped it then use all the advancements in the autonomous side. I know in autonomous there are two sort of softwares out there, one which is one that's however many years old, and one that's much more akin to like on the Tesla at the moment, where it's that self-driving, it's that learning. It isn't, doesn't have all the same restrictions like on a quarry where you've got to set up a site in a certain way, etc. So I imagine they probably looked at it and thought, we can try and kill two birds with one stone without pushing development timelines.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody got anything else for Ross? Bearing in mind you are all still on mute, most of you, I think. No? Okay. Thank you very much, Ross, on behalf of the Institute of Coring, and yeah, really insightful. I think there's going to be a massive amount of development over the next few years along those lines that you spoke about, sort of electric, autonomous, and the Hall Assist element as well. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes, and yeah, good to see Chepstow being part of that.
Well, thanks very much for all the time and the opportunity to present to you guys, and yeah, hopefully it was useful for you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ross.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, all.